They said he showed up before the shadows even knew morning was coming. Every day before alarms, before drills, before breath even settled in lungs was there. Not a ghost, not quite a man. Just there. Pushing a broom across the cold concrete of the iron yard facility like he'd done it 1,000 times before. Hood up, shoulders low, like the weight of memory sat heavier than any barbell. Most thought he was just another janitor until one humid morning. A young special operations hopeful, Theo Monroe, bent down to tie his sneaker and froze mid-knot. Just above the faded seam of the man's collar, hidden in the shadows behind his ear, was a tattoo, an ancient, ghostly imprint, nearly erased by time and silence. The kind of ink only one kind of soldier ever earned, and only if they made it back from assignments no government ever admitted existed. Welcome to Unwritten Chronicles. But before we go deeper, tell me in the comments, what city in the world are you watching from right now? And if you believe stories like this shouldn't be forgotten, smash that subscribe button and help us shine a light on the invisible legends. Nobody knew his real name. On paper, he was listed as Custodial Civilian Restricted. That was it. Every day, same outfit: ashen gray jumpsuit, charcoal hoodie, boots covered in a rust-colored film that even bleach couldn't erase, like they carried whispers of some desert out west. He clocked in at 0420 sharp, without fail, earlier than the trainers, earlier than the candidates. No one saw him arrive. No one ever caught him leaving. He was simply part of the gym, emptying trash bins like ritual, wiping away blood-tinged sweat from mats he never used, polishing mirrors no one cared to look into. He never spoke first, and when spoken to, he kept it short. Morning, copy, all yours. The Forge, what they called this training gym, wasn't like the fitness centers you find in malls or Instagram reels. There was no music, no flexing. It was a crucible. Every man who walked in knew the iron wasn't for sculpting bodies. It was for burning weakness. Pain was the only currency that mattered. The air held the grunt of effort, the clang of steel, and the silent prayers of those hoping not to be cut. Candidates pushed through circuits until skin split from palms, while instructors unforgiving and unflinching drove them past what most would call the threshold of madness. And yet, without fail, before the first plate dropped or the first chalk cloud rose, he was already there, sweeping, refilling, vanishing. The rookies didn't see him. They were too busy surviving. But the veteran instructors, they noticed. The way he folded towels every corner aligned like military dress blues. The way he stacked weights not just by size, but by balance, like he was calculating torque mid-lift. The way he watched the candidates only in mirrors, never directly, not gawking, not curious. Analyzing, and always without headphones, no phone, not even a watch. He moved like a man whose spine had felt years, but whose joints still remembered war. When he shifted a 45-pound barbell from one station to another, he did it with hands that hadn't softened in decades. Some of the younger guys joked about him. Said he looked like a dropout. Bet he tried to get in and flunked out during Hell Week. One laughed. But that laugh died when Staff Sergeant Holt, a hard-shelled former Bravo team lead, shot them a glare that iced the room. Holt didn't joke. Holt didn't flinch. But even he didn't meet the janitor's eyes when he passed. This base had rotated through hundreds of civilians over the years: cooks, drivers, med techs, but nobody stayed long. The security checks were relentless, the hours punishing. Most cracked. He never did, never complained, never called in, never stepped out of line. But everyone noticed this one detail: he always kept the hood up, even indoors, even in August. But one scorched summer morning, after a merciless plate circuit, a candidate named Dawson dropped onto a bench, lungs burning. He leaned over to steady his breath and spotted the janitor nearby, swiping the sweat from the floor. The hoodie slipped just slightly, revealing a sliver of sun-scarred skin behind his ear. Tanned, scarred, inked, a tattoo just barely visible beneath the collar. Dawson squinted through sweat-stung eyes. It wasn't a biker tag, not tribal either. It was something else. Military, sharp, specific. A skeletal trident stabbed clean through a skull. The mark only earned by elite operatives who completed Tier 1 Ghost missions, black-level ops, not even logged in secure archives. The kind of ink you never saw outside the shadows. Would ever dare to even imitate. Dawson didn't say a word. Just watched as the janitor adjusted the edge of his hoodie and walked off without a sound, that old mop bucket squeaking behind him like nothing had ever happened. But something had. From that moment on, Dawson couldn't shake the itch in his head. Neither could the rest of the compound. He didn't speak up that day. Honestly, he didn't even know what he saw. Maybe it was heat stroke. Maybe his tired brain just connected dots that weren't there. But the image wouldn't fade the slant of the ink, the brutal sharpness of the lines, and that washed-out blur that only came from sun, time, and survival. That night, Dawson lay on his bunk with a flashlight tucked under his blanket, scrolling forums he wasn't supposed to even know existed. Deep ops chatter, ghost units, disavowed teams that never showed up in Pentagon briefings. Most of it was trash keyboard warriors and Hollywood leftovers. But a few images hit close. Not exact, but damn near. Trident, skull, covert, blackout missions. The next morning, Dawson tracked the janitor's movements, not obviously, just subtly. But he wasn't the only one. Others had picked up on the shift. The instructors moved around him slower now. Officers gave him a wider berth. And Mason Holt's counterpart, and a legend in his own right, was watching him differently. Not like a threat, and not like a ghost either. More like a man trying to calculate if this quiet cleaner was someone he once saluted. Then came the question. It was Claiborne, a burly redhead from Louisiana. Failed out once. Came back meaner, mouthier. He threw it out loud, half a joke, half challenge. Yo, old man, you ever do more than wipe sweat and vanish? The forge hushed. No one actually stopped lifting, but the sound shifted. The janitor didn't look up, didn't break stride, just kept mopping that blood-soaked corner where two candidates had scrapped too hard during drills. Claiborne gave a nervous snort. Guess not. And then Mason walked over. Calm. No fire, no bark, just leaned in close enough for Claiborne to hear him over the waits and grunts. If you want to graduate, shut your mouth and show some damn respect. That was it. Claiborne didn't say another word for the rest of the day. It didn't take long for the nickname to spread. Quietly, like legend always does. Some started calling him the Ghost. Others just said, Sir. Under their breath, no one really knew why. He never answered to either. He was still early, still silent, still wrapped in routine. But now people noticed. He moved like he was measuring the room constantly. Eyes tracking exits, posture shifts, weaknesses in shoulders, knees, psyches. Some swore he knew who'd failed the course before the instructors did. But then came the moment no one could ignore. Mid-afternoon, in the middle of a grueling lift circuit, the fire alarm went off loud, jarring. A false trip, it turned out, triggered by a glitch in the updated alarm panel. Per safety protocols, everyone cleared out. Candidates jogged out in groups. Instructors followed. But one guy, right tall, solid, pushing through an old torn ligament, collapsed halfway out the door. His knee locked up completely. Dehydrated. Done. Two others ran back in to help but froze as smoke began to curl along the ceiling. Nothing deadly yet, but enough to stall them. It would have taken the medical unit at least 5 minutes to assemble. The janitor took 30 seconds. He didn't stop to ask. No hesitation. No gear. Just yanked a towel from the bench, wrapped it around his face like muscle memory, and charged into the smoke. No drama. No panic. He came out with Reed across his back, not dragging, not stumbling. A perfect fireman's carry. One arm locking Reed's knee, the other balancing him from the shoulder like it was second nature. Reed weighed over 200 pounds. The janitor didn't even flinch. When he emerged, his eyes were red, but locked in. Focused. He lowered Reed gently to a mat and stepped back like it never happened. Fire control arrived seconds later. Cleared the gym, reset the alarms. Nobody said anything about him. Not in the report. Not in the debrief. His name wasn't logged, and nobody asked questions. But everyone saw it. The control, the muscle memory, the speed, That night, as Dawson passed by the janitor's cart on the way back from the showers, something caught his eye. A small stitched patch tucked inside the front pocket, barely visible, black thread almost camouflaged by design. Black on black fabric. Faded stitching but still legible if you knew how to look. RZ9. Raider 09. Not a unit you'd find in any manual. The kind that doesn't get declassified. The kind that doesn't send holiday cards. The kind where retirement means vanishing, and not everyone gets that option. Suddenly, for Dawson, everything clicked. The next day didn't look different. No one said anything. Exactly. But that silence? It had shape. The air inside the forge felt recalibrated, like the whole compound was adjusting its orbit around someone they'd all underestimated. The janitor still came in early, still pushed that same old mop over the same rubber tiles. But now guys moved aside as he passed. Not out of fear, something else, something weightier. Respect. The kind that's already been earned before anyone sees your scars. Mason had been quiet since the fire incident. He hadn't confronted the janitor, hadn't cornered him or tried to probe. But that morning, just after the final sprint drill, while recruits gasped through their cooldowns, Mason walked to the storage closet where the janitor always disappeared during break. 10 minutes, every time. He knocked once, then stepped inside. The janitor sat on an upside-down crate, sipping black coffee from a dented canister. He didn't flinch. Just looked up slowly, calm and unreadable. Mason didn't sit. He stood in silence for a beat, then spoke. I was in Bala Murghab, 9 to 10. You were in that team, right? No answer, just a stare. Mason nodded, like that lack of response told him more than a confession ever could. He went on. There was a mission. No maps. Night op. Intel 0. No drones. They sent 2 in. Only 1 came back. Carried his partner out half a click under mortar fire. Patched his own leg up with a field knife. Vanished before debrief. No name. Just gone. The janitor kept staring. No expression. No tell. Mason exhaled. That was you, wasn't it? A long pause. Then, finally, the janitor spoke quiet. Low. Steady. You shouldn't ask questions you're not ready to live with. Mason didn't smile. Thought so. He turned, stepped toward the door, then stopped. They think they're learning discipline in this place. But you're teaching something we can't write on a whiteboard. The janitor looked down at his boots. They'll need it, if they ever see what I've seen. And just like that, Mason was gone. No one talked about the exchange, not out loud, but the atmosphere began to shift. Small things. One morning, a few instructors found the janitor's locker slightly ajar. Inside, meticulously arranged, was a folded flag, a pair of worn desert boots, and an old special operations coin resting atop a faded name tape. The name said Reeves, no first name, no rank. Just 5 weary letters stitched into history. That afternoon, Dawson finally worked up the courage to approach him. The janitor Reeves was coiling a battle rope, tight and even, like it mattered more than it should. Sir, Dawson said quietly, if you were really part of them, why are you here? Reeves didn't stop coiling. Because this is where they need me. Dawson hesitated. Why not tell anyone? This time, Reeves looked him in the eye. There was no anger, no smugness, just gravity. The moment you need to tell people who you are is the moment you've already forgotten. He stood, wiped his hands on a rag, and walked off. Dawson never asked again. But that night, he stared at the small cloth insignia stitched into the inside of his own locker, lingering on the outline of the raider's blade. And when he finally lay down to sleep, he did so with the quiet, strange comfort of knowing that the man wiping down the mats might be the last wall between this world and one no one dares name. From that day on, no one called him the janitor, not out loud. He was still listed that way on the duty roster, still signed off requisitions under a generic civilian code, still clocked in and out like clockwork. But around the compound, in the hearts of those who had caught even a glimpse of that ink behind his ear or that stillness in his stare, he had become something else entirely. Something else entirely. Reeves had become part of the background hum, the way gravity becomes part of your footing, unseen but essential. He moved through the forge like a shadow with purpose, never interrupting, never commanding, but somehow always there, watching without watching. Recruits began grinding harder when he was nearby. They stopped whining about cold showers, about aching tendons, about their chances of failing out. No one told them to. They just did. Because when you train in the quiet orbit of a man who has nothing to prove but everything to carry, your excuses tend to die on their own. One night, after lights out, Dawson pulled aside a younger candidate and whispered, "If he's watching you, don't try to impress him. Just don't screw it up." The kid didn't get it yet, but he would. Mason, meanwhile, never brought it up again. Not in the daily briefings. Not in formal logs. He didn't have to. Once, during a lull between training sessions, he slipped a folded note inside Reeves's supply cart. No signature. Just 3 words, scrawled in black ink. "You're still serving." Reeves never mentioned it. But the next morning, the battle ropes were coiled with surgical precision, and the squat racks had already been wiped down before anyone set foot inside. The compound's upper staff never said anything either. Not officially. No background checks ever pulled up a military record. No digital file matched the man's face. But those who understood how the deepest operations worked, how ghosts were born and left unnamed, knew this. The best warriors don't always leave footprints. One afternoon, a visiting commander from Bragg happened to glance through the open gym doors. He stopped mid-step, stared, then leaned toward Mason and muttered, "You don't know who that is, do you?" Mason, without even turning, replied, "Number, but I know exactly what he is." The commander didn't follow up. He just nodded, solemnly, and moved on. The gym stayed busy. The clang of plates echoed on. Instructors barked. Recruits sweated. But every now and then, when someone dropped a weight carelessly or slammed a locker in frustration, Reeves would appear in the corner of their vision, just early enough, just silent enough, just present enough to make them sit up straighter, breathe quieter, and in the rare pre-dawn silence, when only the ghosts walked the floor, he would stop at the mirror, pull the hood down, look at the reflection staring back. The tattoo, once defiant, now faded, smeared by years of time, sun, and memory. But it still spoke louder than any salute. He never told his story, never said where he'd served, who he'd lost, or what he'd seen, never revealed his rank, or the operation names whispered in empty hallways. He just kept showing up, mopping mats, coiling ropes, scrubbing blood that wasn't his, until, slowly, every recruit who passed through that gym understood. Legends don't always bark orders. Sometimes they push mop buckets at 4 a.m., silently preparing the ground for those who'll come next. He never wore medals, never demanded thanks, never asked for notice. He just worked, steady, quiet, unseen. But behind that mop, beneath that hood, lived a history no one could wrap their head around, and a past that still kept watch over a place forged for the brutal, the broken, and the brave. Because sometimes the men who've survived the darkest corners of the world won't tell you what they did. They'll just show you how to carry the weight of it. So now I ask you, have you ever crossed paths with someone like that? Someone the world dismissed, until a detail, a glance, or a single moment revealed what they'd been quietly bearing all along? Share their name in the comments. Tell us what they taught you. Because here at Unwritten Chronicles, we don't chase medals, we honor the ones who never stopped serving, even after the world stopped watching. Thank you for watching. If this story left a mark, share it. Subscribe. Help us keep alive the silent strength of those who fight without fanfare. And next time you walk past someone sweeping a floor, look twice. Doing the right thing is rarely convenient. It doesn't always feel heroic. Often, it's just a quiet decision to act with compassion when it would be easier to turn away. But those moments, the hard, thankless, honest ones, they change lives. In a world that often rewards selfishness and speed, kindness and respect are the real disruptors. They are the glue that holds fractured things together. Leo's decision that morning, sparked by nothing but instinct and decency, became a story neither he nor Ellis could have imagined. A story of redemption, a story of memory, a story of courage not just in battle, but in ordinary life. Because in the end, it's not awards or praise that define us. It's integrity. If this story struck something in you, don't just move on. Like it. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that good still exists. And subscribe, because there are more stories like this out there, waiting to be told.